Me Too problems in the legislature go bipartisan, and the governor's been signing more bills. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. With me today, I'm the lucky one, Charlie Wheeler is back. He is Director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at the University of Illinois Springfield, longtime State House reporter for the Sun-Times before that. Charlie, welcome.
Thank you, Bernie. It's always fun to be here.
And Dave Dahl, also glad to have you, Dave, WTAX State House reporter. Welcome back.
Double that for me. Fun.
So we've heard a lot about Me Too movement and, I think a couple hundred or three women signing some kind of a letter at the State House some months ago about the atmosphere. Well, some of the problems that we have seen mostly fell upon Democrats and people who were working around Speaker Madigan. Now we have a first-term state representative, Nick Sauer of Lake Barrington, who Politico came out with a story one morning this week. By the end of the day, Nick Sauer had resigned. It said that he had an ex-girlfriend who claimed that he had put naked photos of her online and was apparently catfishing is something we'll have to discuss, but kind of representing to people trying to have men contact her through that picture. Charlie, he is a Republican, and what do we make of this? Not good judgment, apparently, for the first termer in the House.
I would say it was abysmal judgment, and it may even be criminal because there's a law against it's a so-called revenge porn when you take a former intimate partner and put those photos online.
Yeah, I guess I should say, as we tape this, I haven't heard his response other than a letter of resignation saying this is a distraction and I don't want to get in the way of serving my constituents, so we don't know exactly what his side of the story is.
But what the woman alleged was that she found out that almost from the beginning of the relationship he was doing this. And so I'm saying to myself, I must really be old because I can't ever imagine, like I was saying to you guys before the show, in my day, if you wanted to see a picture of a naked woman, you had to go get a Playboy. I guess things have changed. But yeah, it goes, I think, to show what I said before, that the problem with men with, what shall I say, less than acceptable morals is a bipartisan issue. And having abysmal judgment also is something that crosses the aisle. Now
we should say that as news of this broke during the day, Republicans and Democrats in the position to do so both said that Mr. Sauer should resign. He did. Melinda Bush is a Democrat who's in the state Senate. She's been active on the sexual harassment task force, I believe.
Of which Sauer was a member.
Of which Sauer was a member, that's right. And, she said, you got to, believe the victim, this is terrible. But Governor Rauner said he should step down. Leader Durkin of House Republicans said he will be stepping aside because, the allegations need to be investigated appropriately. State Senator McConchie, who is from his area, I believe, or close to it, said...
I believe he's a senator, isn't he?
I think he is. Said, I believe also he should go. So, Dave, the governor was asked about this. Let's go into that a little bit because there was an interesting way to look at things and how he was asked as well.
Well, and it was in the context of the governor at the sausage factory. He was
Vienna hot dog
celebrating the
factory.
125th anniversary of Vienna beef, and a reporter asked him, doesn't this mean there's a bipartisan culture of harassment? And in response, the governor said that Sauer is doing the right thing by stepping down, but the culture starts with Mike Madigan, that Madigan sets the tone. He established the culture, he enabled the culture, and it's all at his feet. And the reporter I don't know if he gave him a chance to walk it back, but the governor took the chance to double down on it.
I actually saw some various TV stations in Chicago reported the governor just saying that, like, oh, this is Mike Madigan's fault, and then there wasn't much response. I think the newspapers had more response, but is that a reasonable thing to say, Charlie, that this is
no, it's
kind
not
of
reasonable.
Something about what Mike Madigan has done in the legislature?
It's delusional. I mean, for whatever reason, the governor is fixated on Mike Madigan. You know, it's a wonder he didn't say that the airplane that crashed in Mexico the other day, that was Mike Madigan's fault. No, this has nothing to do with Mike Madigan. Former Representative Sauer was a young guy who apparently didn't have a very good internal controls to kind of stop him from doing something that is, at the very least, abhorrent and probably bordering on criminal. And it has nothing to do with Mike Madigan.
Yeah. We should say that the governor had appointed Mr. Sauer
He appointed him to the tollway board
as chairman of the
before he
tollway
became,
board, and
yeah,
the tollway, of course, is a giant, multi-$100 million operation up in the
patronage
Chicago
operation.
area. And the governor gets to appoint, members of that board, and he had been the chairman of it, I think, appointed in 2015. Then he got elected to the legislature in 2016.
No, I mean, it has nothing to do with Mike Madigan. Sauer was not using his, what would you say?
His position of power.
His position of power. He was not using state resources, presumably, to do this. He created a phony Instagram account that purported to be this woman and tried to engage, I guess, other guys in sexually explicit conversation.
How weird is that? Anyway.
Well, it is pretty weird,
Yeah,
but in any event, what does that have to do with Mike Madigan? That's nuts.
Yeah, it appears that whatever problems former Representative Sauer has, they're independent of being representative, and more, between him and the man in the mirror and the people who his actions affect. I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that he used to be in the General Assembly, other than the fact that he happened to be in the General Assembly. I mean, Keith Farnham, the late Representative Farnham, was stupid enough to use state computers for his child porn and
And
stuff.
he ended up
going
to jail.
He ended up dying in
Yeah.
prison.
Yeah, yeah.
So the fact that he happened to be a state representative is just a sidelight here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting.
One interesting
But-
question, though, is he was running for re-election, so he's on the ballot. I don't think his name can be removed at this point. Can it?
I think it can, but I'm not sure. I don't think that the ballot is set. I believe it's in late August that the State Board of Elections is supposed to certify names on the ballot, and so I don't know the legality.
So if he withdraws,
I
is
believe
there
the party can name a replacement still.
still?
I
Okay,
mean,
'cause I
there
thought
was
that
a deadline,
has
but
passed.
I'm not sure what happens upon the removal of a name for reasons other than choice. Like if someone, God forbid, would die or something, could the party replace them on the ballot still before the ballot is set?
Yeah,
I'm
if
not
I
sure.
recall correctly, there was an instance years and years ago where someone died right before an election, and the name remained on the ballot.
Yeah, well, that has happened from time to time, particularly in. Yeah, we'll have to, follow the news on that one because we're not positive, but we will see what happens. I believe it's a very Republican area, so it.
Oh, sure it is. But on the other hand, if his name is still there, you have to think that a lot of people aren't going to vote
No,
for him, and
that's
they'll
true.
vote for the Democrat or they'll vote for the third-party
Right.
candidate.
I'm
The
guessing
independent.
I'm guessing there's a way for him to remove himself at this point from the ballot. So we'll see how that goes. Among things, I said at the beginning of the show or the opening that the governor's been signing some bills. One of them involves something called offshoring. This is a practice used by Democratic and Republican governors in recent years where not all the people who work for the governor are paid by the governor's office budget. Some work for other agencies. Comptroller Susana Mendoza, a Democrat who is not shy about occasionally taking on Governor Ron on various things, said that he actually had, I believe, more people in the governor's office paid by other agencies than paid by the governor's office itself. There was overwhelming support in the legislature for the bill that says in coming budgets, starting with next year's, if you work for the governor's office, you have to be paid for by that agency, and the governor ended up signing it.
The big example here, Bernie, was that the governor had a Secretary of Education named Beth Purvis, and she was paid not out of the governor's office budget, not out of any educational budget, but out of the Department of Human Services. So if you're wondering, well, gee, what's this all about? It's about cases like that, having someone who reports to the governor, is part of the governor's cabinet, if you will, and then whose salary is paid off the books of something really totally different.
Well, and which, the legislators who voted for this and the comptroller said, particularly those agencies need that money for other things to do their programs. And of course, Beth Purvis was paid at the annual rate of $250,000, which is awfully high and more than the governor makes.
Yeah, practically the #1 state employee, in the photo anyway.
Well, and Mendoza said that there were 63 people who worked for the governor who were on other agency payrolls, and only 47 of his 110 employees were on his payroll. And so her point was that this is not giving a true picture of the cost of the governor's office. And there were millions and millions of dollars that are being hidden, you might say. And you mentioned this is a recent thing. I would say I'm not sure how recent it would be, because
No.
I can remember as a young reporter people who were on, who worked for Dan Walker and were on other agency payrolls. Former Governor Pat Quinn being among them.
Right, because he had been
And
a
that
Walker
was darn
campaign
near
guy.
50 years ago, yeah.
Is it that long already?
Oh, yeah.
The governor signed the bill quietly. It wasn't one where he had a ceremony or anything. We got a news release at the end of the day, and in the news release he said that it was a transparency issue, and he turned the whole thing, if you look at it from Susana Mendoza's perspective, he turned the whole thing backwards and said, I'm the one who's been transparent all this time, and now I want the other constitutional officers to do like I do, be transparent. So if you read the news release, and if you read a news story based solely on the news release, you'd think that the governor was the one who came up with this, that he's the hero and it's everybody else who's messed up.
Yeah, well, it is interesting. I hadn't yet determined, as we talk here, how many other constitutional officers that he said should also follow this, might have a situation like this. Apparently, and I read on Capitol Facts that there were some lawyers in the Department of Revenue who had intergovernmental agreements to work for the Attorney General. So I'm not sure exactly how this would apply to that, but it might over time.
Yeah, I would say if you actually go through a budget book and look at how everything is laid out, the salaries and all the other expenses of each constitutional officer are within their own budget. The exception might be a handful of attorneys who work full-time for other agencies, and then they are therefore paid through that agency's budget. But in the case of Ms. Purvis, as Dave mentioned, she wasn't doing anything for the Department of Human Services.
I think the governor came up with something like, there are children in state custody or something who have to get educated or something like that.
But the fact of the matter is, Jesse White has probably more state employees than any other officer other than the governor and the executive branch. And yet he doesn't have the guy who works at the Motor Vehicle Bureau, the Secretary of State's Motor Vehicle Services Bureau here in Springfield. He doesn't have him on somebody else's payroll. He's on Jesse's payroll.
Right, Secretary of State. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's pretty straightforward, and the governor's office has probably been the big.
And the
for
difference
governors in the past 50 years is the big problem.
And the governor oversees, gosh, I don't know how many, probably more than 100 different agencies and bureaus and departments where he is the guy in charge. None of the other constitutional officers have that kind of reach
Right,
within the executive branch.
The governor for 4 years has been saying, my office budget is a lot smaller than Pat Quinn's. I have fewer positions than Pat Quinn had, et cetera, et cetera. And the Truth in Hiring Act is meant to squelch
And I
that.
think he says even when you add up all the offshoring, we're still doing better. So I'm not sure what the analysis comes down on that. But I mean, he continues to say I'm
the
better
AP
than
looked
the
at
past.
that a couple years ago, and he was flat out wrong,
There you go.
according to the Associated Press. So who do you believe, the Associated Press or the governor? I would say AP's got a better reputation of being factual than Governor Rauner does.
There you go. On to something else he signed. He has now allowed the use of medical marijuana in schools. And there's also a bill on his desk that, related to marijuana, in a sense, because it's a similar kind of plant, may allow the growth of hemp in Illinois, and that there was some speculation in one story I read that he might sign that at the state fair. We don't know that yet. But the medical marijuana in schools is a step forward, Dave?
It's a step forward for those who believe that medical marijuana is good. It's still contentious with some. Some say it's a gateway to the really bad stuff. And what this is about is kids who suffer from seizure disorders or from chronic pain I think the child who was the flashpoint of this was in too much pain to even attend school. So it was either have the medical marijuana at school or don't go to school. And the medical marijuana in a case like the governor signed it's a I forget the real name for it, but it's a derivative product like an oil or a cookie or something. It's not a joint.
They're not smoking pot.
Not smoking in the boys' room,
right.
Brownsville Station, 1970. But it allows the parent to come to school and administer the marijuana cookie to the child.
And some of it is just patches where they just put it
allows
on
them
the
to do
skin.
it on school property or on a school
Right.
bus.
And I believe it also gives school districts the opportunity to say yes or no. You know, there's some permissive things, so it's not a mandate.
And it's another one that the governor signed in the dark or by AutoPen or whatever. He didn't have a thing for that one either. I don't understand it.
Well, there are a lot of bills, and you pick your spots, I guess, when you're highlighting things. So you can look at it all ways. He did sign one in quite the light of day, and this is, we're familiar with epi-pens or injectors to fight anaphylactic shock if you are allergic to certain things. And he did sign a bill that extended a law that was already in place to absolve doctors who prescribe EpiPens to, like, police departments from liability if anything goes wrong with the application. So it allows police to carry those EpiPens in other places. And he was with a family that lost a child and made a big deal. It was a top story in the Tribune one day. So he did sign a law that extended that.
The police can't get sued for having the EpiPen and administering it to someone.
Right.
The medical people who provide the police with the EpiPens now cannot be sued. And it seems to me that this bill, getting from where we were to this bill, is not as big as getting from zero to where we were. But anyway, that's one, and it's Annie's bill.
Wasn't the problem that the police were free from liability under an earlier law, but doctors were reluctant to prescribe?
Right.
And so
to allow the police to have it.
Very few of them were doing it, so the doctors needed this.
So this cleaned it up.
So it extended it, and as we have all watched over the years, governors decide what will make them look good or make good publicity or let the public know something important, and this, was one that he picked.
Elmhurst is where this happened, where the bill signing happened. The young girl involved was going to be an 8th grader, and I believe the best friend who was at the news conference was going to be a junior. So I think Annie's class is still in the middle of high school now.
Gotcha. A colleague of mine, Doug Finke, did a story this week. He talked about the foundation created by the governor a few years ago when the legislature wouldn't do it to try to raise money to fix physical problems, capital problems at the state fairgrounds in Springfield and DuQuoin. The need is apparently like $180 million that if you look at all the roofs and buildings and roads. And because the legislature wouldn't go along, there was a foundation created, and they were trying to raise $2 or $3 million a year, but Doug found in his story that in 2017 the foundation had only raised $32,000. It's also true that the legislature appropriated, was it $20 or $30 million for some improvements,
repairs,
and some, as the state fair gets underway next week, late in the week, and will go for I think 10 days as usual. 10 or 11, some roads have been fixed and they've done some things, but the Coliseum still remains closed because that's where the big horse shows all used to be. So we'll see what happens. The governor and his wife did raise like $15 million to fix the governor's mansion. It's now reopened. It's in museum shape, but the Fairgrounds Foundation has a long way to go, and we'll see if that kicks it up.
The day they opened the mansion a couple of Saturdays ago, I asked the governor about that. How could you raise $15 million with this foundation? And then the Fairgrounds Foundation has a vastly different result. And of course, he talked around that and said, oh yeah, well, the lawmakers have to appropriate or something, which wasn't even my question. It's private donors helping the mansion and a lack of private donors helping the fairgrounds, and to the tune of $32,000 or something like that, which would barely buy a couple of bricks for the Coliseum.
Yeah,
I think the story in the SJR noted that people are kind of feeling tapped out from working on the mansion, and they want to catch their breath before they pony up big dollars. Some of the ag firms, ag business firms that were
They could get naming rights to buildings, for
Yeah.
example, as part of a
So
foundation.
it may still
thing.
happen. It's
Yeah, well, and I found it interesting that State Representative Tim Butler, I believe in the same story, he said maybe it's time for the governor to donate like we thought he would, and which is an interesting thing to
Yeah.
ask the leader of the party in the state.
I don't get it. We've had the naming rights discussion for years and nothing's happened on it.
Yeah. Speaking of names, let's
the
talk.
Dave Dahl Coliseum.
You heard it here first.
Yes,
And that's D as in David.
And we know you
A-H-L.
radio guys have a lot to give to such good causes.
It's fabulous, right?
That's right. Operating Engineers Local 150 is an interesting organization. They do various kinds of construction work around the state, and it's a 23,000 member union in 3 states, including Illinois. And they have endorsed both J.B. Pritzker, the Democrat, and Sam McCann of the third party, New Conservative Party, for governor, which the Illinois GOP, which of course backs Governor Rauner, said shows that McCann and Pritzker are both Democrats. And McCann then responded by saying, that's not true. I'm the true conservative, and the people from James Sweeney is the head of that union, which has given a lot of money and help to Sam McCann to get on the ballot, says, well, half of our members are Republican, half are Democrat. The governor doesn't like unions from what we have seen him do. Therefore, we want to give our Republican members somebody to vote for so they can vote for McCann and the Democrats can vote for Pritzker. Charlie, is this on the square, or is this all a Democratic ploy?
Well, I don't think it's a Democratic ploy. I think it's a union that really, really wants Rauner out of there. And so they're figuring, okay, our Democratic members will be for Pritzker. Our Republican members might be thinking, well, as bad as Rauner is, he's better than the Democrat. And so we want to give them an alternative. So we're saying, you don't have to vote for Pritzker, but if you're not going to vote for Pritzker, vote for McCann.
Well, and if you're okay with abortion and you're okay with same-sex marriage, then Pritzker's definitely your guy. If you're not okay with those things, then you're going to have a real problem voting for Pritzker, and McCann gives you a place to go.
Yeah.
Now, what about the argument that Ronald Reagan would have made, if I agree with you 80% of the time, then I should let you in my party, and can Rauner get some of the Republican base back that fled him when, he only beat Jeannie Ives, the very conservative Republican House member from Wheaton, by 3 percentage points in the primary. Can Rauner generate that interest in the base, do we think, in the next 3 months of this election?
That's the big question. And I don't know what the answer is. At the moment, it doesn't look good for him because he's got all this baggage. And the big thing, as I've said before in different venues, is a matter of trust. People don't trust him. His fellow Republicans do not trust him because he lied to them. He lied to the Cardinal. That's what got Ives
This
into
was
the
about
race in
the
the first time.
House Bill
About
40, which
signing
allows
a bill that expanded abortion coverage for people who have state employee health insurance, people who are on Medicaid.
Right.
Yeah, and once you lose that, it's really hard to get it back.
Right. Now, he, of course, says he changed his mind, but he had actually put out a statement through his office that he was going to veto the bill, and told people that, and apparently tried to get people to stick with him on the budget by saying that as well. So,
Yeah,
all
and that's
pretty
his
tough.
defense, but from watching this stuff for a very long time, once you get a reputation for not being honest, it's very hard to get that back in the political arena.
Yeah,
Understood.
but he's not advertising to you, Charlie. How many counties are downstate? 94, 96? How many people who aren't watching programs like this, and I've said it before, I've said it here before.
Dave, we're all over downstate. They're watching. Come on.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's only 20 or so counties in the whole state that have more population than a typical ward in the city of Chicago.
Well, it is interesting,
So-
and that continues to be pretty much
No,
a Democratic
and
area.
part of it is the people who are engaged are going to be noticing that. The people who voted for Jeannie Ives, are they going to say, okay, I'm now going to vote for Bruce Rauner? Or are they going to say, I'm going to vote for Sam McCann because he represents what I believe in? I can't vote for the Democrat for the reason that Dave said on those issues.
On the liberal,
Yeah, on
social
the liberal
issues.
stuff.
Interesting.
Here's Sam McCann, and he represents my values. I'm going to vote for him.
Speaking of Democrats, President Former President Barack Obama this week came out with some endorsements nationwide, I think about 80. But in Illinois, he endorsed J.B. Pritzker and Juliana Stratton for governor and lieutenant governor, Kwame Raoul for attorney general, and then 3 people running for U.S. House: Sean Casten versus Peter Roskam, Brendan Kelly versus Mike Bost, and Lauren Underwood versus Randy Hultgren. What's the effect? The Obama name in Trump territory, and a lot of downstate has been Trump territory, isn't the greatest name, may not help, but is this a good thing for Mr. Pritzker or not? Jump in.
You know, where are they going to go? Obviously, even my 15-year-old son listened to something on the radio about Obama endorsing the Democrat, Raul and some other Democrats. He said, well, of course, they're all Democrats. So I don't think it's a surprise that Obama supported Pritzker. I think the choice of the 3 Congress people you mentioned is quite interesting. I wonder what Betsy Londrigan is thinking.
Yeah,
what do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, who was running against Rodney Davis. Now maybe Obama's going to come out with a second round of endorsements. Who knows? But I'm guessing his endorsement for the opponent to Mike Bost probably isn't going to help that much. It may even help Bost because that area is not. Well, it's fairly Republican.
Yeah, that's in the Metro East area near St. Louis. Yeah.
Well, it goes into Southern Illinois also.
Right. And interestingly, Rodney Davis, who said during the campaign he couldn't vote for either candidate after the Access Hollywood tape came out with President Trump saying bad things about women. But when I recently asked Rodney Davis who he would vote for, or who he had voted for, he said basically it's a secret ballot, none of your business, so he won't say. But he was with the president in Granite City at the steel mill where the president appeared a week ago, and said he's always happy to be with the president, and he would have been with Obama and the same thing, and we'll see where that ends up. We are about out of time. We'll see how that race goes. Charlie Wheeler, Dave Dahl, thank you for helping me discuss these things. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.